What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So ever since Halo Infinite released, it hasn't been a very smooth development for 343, and on Friday, they released the roadmap for the rest of this year for the game, and it didn't go over so well online. Now to the point where people are asking, should 343 even be developing Halo anymore? We're gonna go over that one here today. Also, we are gonna be talking about that JoyCon situation that just keeps ongoing with the whole drifting issue. Now, where a former employee who worked to repair these things give us a bit of a behind-the-scenes look at it. And we're also going to be talking about what could end up being the next big studio or publisher acquisition. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps that a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below and ring that notification bell so you can keep up to date with all the uploads here on the channel. And we're going to start today with the biggest Twitter mystery, who doesn't even try to be one, that being Hideo Kojima, after he posted up this image over on his account, which looks like his new studio. It looks pretty nice, as a director share with his name on it, because, well, actually that sounds about right for Kojima. And we have several TVs and monitors right there in front of his chair. But then the big topic coming out of this image is on the right. You got to zoom all the way in, and there's a PlayStation 5 development kit hooked up. The one that looks kind of like a space hangar. Yeah, that's just kind of sitting over there, plugged in, and people immediately thought, wait a minute. Does this mean that Kojima Productions is working on a new PlayStation game that's not announced? I mean, it's possible. Sure, why not? Do I think this PlayStation 5 dev kit that's just hooked up means it's absolutely happening? No, because they would probably still be working to update and do different things with Death Stranding Director's Cut as they work out different bugs and glitches and might need to push a patch for an update. From what we've heard, it sounds like he's in talks or working out something with Xbox and some sort of game for cloud computing, but I wouldn't be shocked if we hear that Kojima Productions is making another PlayStation game. I just don't know if a PS5 development kit on a table that you have to zoom in a picture to see is any indication that that's absolutely happening. Also, last Friday, we did indeed get new Sega Genesis games added to Nintendo Switch Online, and it's actually pretty good. We can see this posted up by Nintendo over on their account, saying 3 classic Sega Genesis games have just been made available for Nintendo Switch Online plus expansion pack members. Space Harrier 2, Shining Force 2, and Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball. And yeah, that's a pretty good lineup. I know it's 3 games, but those are 3 quality games. While I'm not as into Space Harrier, Shining Force 2 is an awesome RPG, and I recommend any fan of like the older RPG games, definitely check that one out. And then Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball, which I just call Sonic Spinball, is an interesting take on pinball, obviously kind of merging Sonic together with that, but that was a really cool game back in the day, and I think still holds up pretty well now. And like I said, 3 games, but 3 quality titles. I would definitely be checking out either Shining Force 2 or Sonic Spinball. Really good games, certainly worth updating and checking them out. Oh, and I feel like as we head through 2022 into 2023, we're going to see more and more of Sony's first-party titles make the push onto PC, and now we're starting to see job listings pop up that kind of give us that indication. We can see this posted up over on greenhouse.io saying Senior Director, PC Planning and Strategy. Now they list some of the responsibilities being lead PC growth and commercial strategy, growing PC monthly active users for PC content, develop and implement global PC store strategy and process. And I do believe that at some point, we will see Sony try to introduce their own launcher that could tie into PlayStation Plus along with game streaming and remote play, which is something they already offer on PC, but just make it more apparent that it exists and have native games when it comes to some of their PC ports. I mean, God of War is over there, which is obviously a big deal for them, Horizon, and I think that will just continue to move as we head through the rest of this year into 2023. So don't be surprised if we see more of these positions more or less geared around getting games over to PC popping up. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Halo Infinite. We're not going to waste any time. We're going to go immediately to the roadmap. We can see this posted up on the Halo Waypoint website, Season 2, Lone Wolves, May 3rd to November 7th. This was an immediate sticking point for everyone online, because the idea of Season 1 being 6 months is that it would allow 343 to kind of get into a groove, and they themselves said that seasons that would be upcoming would be shorter. They were shooting for 3-month seasons, and this was a criticism I brought up. People told me, well, hold on, the next couple of seasons are going to start just being 3 months. Not this time. It looks like Season 2 also a 6-month season, which means The first year of Halo Infinite, we had 2 seasons, and well, we can see some of the content here for Season 2 Lone Wolves. Catalyst, that's going to be the arena map, and then Breaker, which is Big Team Battle. So 2 new maps. They both look pretty good. They have an entire video that shows like fly around shots of them to show off some of the different sections of the map. Different game modes that'll be added: King of the Hill, Land Grab, and Last Spartan Standing. Last Spartan Standing seems to be pulling the most interest here, and well, I'm curious myself how that turns out. They're gonna have some narrative events, which includes Interference. That's starting immediately on May 3rd. Then Alpha Pack starting later on in the season, July 19th. There will be a new 100-tier battle pass, which is completely expected. I'm curious and hopeful that they're able to make the battle pass a bit more rewarding, because it seemed like every other level in this most recent battle pass, all the way up to level 100, was like you'd get a challenge swap or an experience boost, not necessarily a piece of armor or a coating. So hopefully you get more armor and coatings in this battle pass. I think they had mentioned that, so we'll see. Then you have Fracture Event, that being Entrenched. That's starting week 1, May 24th to the 30th. And then Campaign Network Co-op. It's important to note Network specifically. They're looking late August target. This is going to be something you would be playing just online. They will be targeting split-screen campaign co-op in Season 3, and that's still to be determined. Remember, Season 3 isn't going to be starting until November 8th after Season 2 ends. A couple of other bits here includes Campaign Mission Replay. If you're not aware, you can't actually replay different missions in the open world campaign unless you restart campaign completely and then play through it. They're just one-time shots right now, so it'd be good to at least have that for anyone wanting to go back through some of these different missions. Forge Open Beta, that is the most important thing on this entire card, by the way. You gotta get the creation tools into the hands of the community so they can kind of take over and help out 343. That's looking at a September target, and they did mention they are trying their best to get Forge out as soon as possible. This going to open beta just tells me there's gonna be growing pains. The thing's probably gonna break over and over again, but at least they'll have it out there and they can start getting that moving. And just overall quality of life improvements. They did give us a quick look at Season 3 that's pretty vague for the most part. A new battle pass expected, new maps, new modes, new sandbox items, new narrative events, new Fracture Event, Forge Open Beta, just I guess continue to evolve there, and then more quality of life improvements along with that campaign split screen co-op. Now, after this entire roadmap released on Friday, remember that's typically when you put news out that you know is probably not going to be received well, because you're thinking, oh, this goes out on Friday, the media and press, they usually go home for the weekend and maybe by Monday they'll forget or something like that. But I mean, we can see Forbes, this from Paul Tassi, does Microsoft need to give Halo to someone besides 343? There's a lot of hot takes around this roadmap that was released, and it just appears that 343, and this is where I'm kind of conflicted. They made a good Halo game for the feel, the gameplay, everything. It feels like Halo. It really does call back to the original days of Halo 2 and Halo 3, just a bit more modernized. Not as far as they went with Halo 5, a nice middle ground. But they don't really know how to deal with post-content release in the live service era, which is where they put themselves in. They put themselves in the bucket with Fortnite, Warzone, all these games that have continuous updates and have done a pretty good job for the most part keeping the community engaged with these different content releases. And it's something that 343 is just trying to figure out, but they haven't been able to up until this point. I mean, really consider that even basic features aren't coming until, potentially more than a year after release, and this game was already delayed 1 year. Campaign split screen co-op. Campaign co-op has been a staple for the Halo series for a long time now, and the fact that it's taken this long, even to be able to replay missions, sounds like a small thing, is a pretty big deal when you're trying to do things like hunt skulls, or you're trying to do achievements, or any of these different runs. It's unfortunate the position we're in right now with 343 and Halo Infinite, because I do genuinely believe they're trying really hard, and they did mention in the Halo Waypoint post that they're trying to take into account the work-life balance. I don't believe that if they just crunched 80 to 100 hours a week, that the seasons would be better right now or come out faster. I legitimately think 343 just needs to continue hiring on people who are more experienced with some of these post-launch release windows and schedules so they can get into a groove, as they say. It's just taking them longer than I think the community was ready to put up with. Which does bring into question, should 343 be the Halo studio for Microsoft? going forward? And I think that's a great question to bring up. I mean, think about all the talent that Microsoft is continuing to onboard now with these studio acquisitions. You can look within Bethesda, you can look within Activision, probably find studios who could make a better Halo game over 343. I mean, Activision has a ton of studios that are very well equipped to create a first-person shooter that have less time generally than what 343 did with Halo Infinite. Sure, I know they made the Slipstream engine, all that stuff, right? New engine. And it sounds like there was a lot of pivoting in development when it came to vision and direction. But you bring in Activision with Sledgehammer, Infinity Ward, Treyarch, you look over there at id. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked, and I think it's a good idea, if Microsoft looks around and says, hey, does anyone want to try a spin-off title? We can make another ODST. You can create it however you like, whatever engine you want to use, and then we'll see how the response is. We'll drop it on the Game Pass, this smaller game, and see what happens. And yeah, you might find out that you could make a better Halo game with one of them. Otherwise, though, maybe a studio they bring on could help 343 and run support for some of this post-launch content. Otherwise, though, it's kind of a point of just wait and see, and we just sort of hang out, continue playing the same maps or 2 more maps being added in, and hopefully 2-3 years from now, we look back on Halo Infinite's launch and like run up after that, similar to Master Chief Collection. Came out in a pretty bad state. And then eventually it got a lot better. So here's hoping that eventually happens for Halo Infinite. Next up, let's talk about the Joy-Con drift situation, because we had a bit of a peek behind the curtain here for how Nintendo was working to deal with this, which from the outside looked cool and collected and just kind of ignoring it. I mean, I think at this point, Nintendo obviously is aware that there is a serious issue with those Joy-Con controllers, but like they're so deep into the generation, so many Joy-Cons are out there, it feels like there's only so much they can do right now until they break away and do the next generation Switch and they can bring in, I guess, a new controller technology, what have you there. But we do see them at times kind of ignore it and sort of apologize, sort of not. It's a lot of it having to do with being caught up in the courtroom now with class action lawsuits, and they can only say so much. But on the consumer side, it's painting a completely different picture. And now we're starting to hear from other accounts of former employees who worked within repair facilities, even supervising some of this stuff, giving us some accounts of hundreds of Joy-Cons coming in at a time and a very small window to repair them. We can see this posted up by Kotaku, where they say Nintendo Switch Joy-Con Repair Center was constantly overwhelmed, claims former supervisor. Plagued by high turnover and outstanding volume, the Joy-Con Center made frequent mistakes. I'm gonna leave a link to this article down below in the sources. As usual, I would check this out because it's an interesting contrast to how Nintendo kind of describes it or tries to avoid describing the situation with the Joy-Con. Now, this all comes down to a company called United Radio. Kotaku says, according to our source, who Kotaku has independently confirmed worked at a high level within the repair shop, the faulty design of the hardware was felt most acutely by those tasked with fixing the hundreds of Joy-Cons that flooded in each day. They said that easily thousands of Joy-Cons were coming through each week. United Radio confirmed over the phone that they handle Switch repairs, but the customer-facing process goes through Nintendo. United Radio relied on temporary employees that were supplied through Aerotech, a staffing company. The former supervisor said, we ended up having to set up an entire new workspace just for Joy-Con repair. I'm gonna tell you now, this is not uncommon for these different companies. Microsoft did this with the Red Ring in particular, where they actually take it and outsource it to companies that hire on, and they basically create a large workspace to fix these things as fast as possible. It's interesting because the Joy-Con in particular, we all know there is a problem with it. And Nintendo, like I said, tries to avoid talking about it or ignore it outright. But clearly, with thousands coming in, they say hundreds every day, it was like, yeah, that's gonna happen. We're just gonna show up at our doorstep. They have 4 days to complete the repair on this. Originally, they described Nintendo just replacing these with new ones just to try to get caught up here, and then they eventually wanted to fix them. But because of the turnover that was going on with the temporary employment agency and everything, they started to have frequent mistakes to where they would send people just the wrong Switch for certain repairs mixed in with Joy-Cons, and if they weren't able to identify certain serial numbers and match everything up, they would just wipe it to avoid having different people's data go to other people, which led to some Reddit posts about that. So yeah, it does appear, as we all pretty much know the JoyCon situation is pretty severe. There are a lot of them that are drifting, and we're hearing behind the scenes talks now from repair facilities that they were dealing with thousands at a time with 4-day repair windows. Like I said, I'll leave a link to the article down below. It's just interesting to get a bit of a peek behind the curtain for it. Next up, let's talk about the next big studio and publisher acquisition, as this seems to be gaining some steam online, and we're gonna come back to the different companies that could be buying them, but this has to do with Ubisoft reportedly preparing themselves for a buyout or a sale or any of that. And this came from two different sources, Kotaku and Bloomberg. We can see this posted up over on Kotaku. Report private equity eyeing Ubisoft as the next big gaming acquisition. Now, originally I saw Bloomberg reporting this on Friday, mentioning private equity firms. For example, Blackstone and KKR were both named. And going from there, this, according to Kotaku sources, Ubisoft has been working closely with several outside consultancy firms in recent years to audit various parts of its business. While companies will do this to become more profitable and prepare for the future, sources Kotaku spoke with suggest it's a sign Ubisoft's trying to tidy up its books for a potential sale. Now, the two entities that Bloomberg named, that being Blackstone and KKR, are studying the French business and have preliminary takeover interest in Ubisoft, but that the company hasn't yet entered into any serious negotiations with potential acquirers. And I mean, that's kind of what you would say if you're like, okay, let's calm down here. We don't need to mess up the stock or have issues with insider trading or anything there, but their stock still jumped like 11% when these reports came out, obviously, because people want to be on board with that if an actual acquisition does happen and all of that with the stock. So obviously, this happens, and people then immediately go, well, Microsoft has to buy them, it has to happen, or Sony has to come in and buy them. I mean, if a private equity firm buys Ubisoft, I do wonder how that would affect their ongoing business. Like, would the equity firm, like, try to steer the ship for Ubisoft, or would they put people in place in order to maximize profit and, yeah, put in microtransactions, focus on the live service games, but not necessarily steer completely away from trying to make good games? It really is hard to say how this would affect Ubisoft, if it does happen at all. I don't think Microsoft would be able to buy them right now. They're having a hard enough time trying to slip Activision Blizzard past a lot of lawmakers and everything without too much notice there. And if they go, okay, yeah, we're also taking Ubisoft, I do wonder what kind of spotlight that would then, again, put on Activision Blizzard specifically. Like, well, now they're trying to take Ubisoft and they're already getting this. And there's a lot up in the air there right now for Microsoft to where they might be like, you know, we could buy them, but we're good right now. We're not trying to make too much noise overall. We got to get this Activision Blizzard thing done first. Sony, people ask, this happens a lot, right? Could Sony really buy them? Do they have enough money? I mean, probably. Like that, we all try to figure this out from the outside, but like there's financing, there's other things that Sony could do if they really wanted to buy Ubisoft. But I question if Sony believes they would have to, unless someone would come in and buy Ubisoft that would then take games away from Sony, like Microsoft. I guess there's also the possibility of like a company out of nowhere, like Amazon or Apple or maybe Tencent coming in. So a lot of possibilities here, but this isn't the first time we've heard rumors around Ubisoft considering being sold and looking for a buyer. So, I mean, we'll keep an eye on this one. I don't think it's something that's going to break like this week or in the coming weeks, but it wouldn't surprise me if by the end of this year, we are talking about Ubisoft and all of their studios and IPs being acquired. So we'll see. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about another announcement from Friday after the final news wave of last week went up, and that has to do with a big release date being revealed by Nintendo. This for Splatoon 3. They put out an entire trailer showing off gameplay for it, and it is coming out September 9th, which most people then looked at Xenoblade Chronicles 3 moving up into July, and then looking at Splatoon getting right at the end of summer, and we all kind of came to the determination that, yeah, they swapped places. That's probably what I would go with there. But we did have a good look at the game, and I mean, yeah, it looks like Splatoon. I know there are some hardcore Splatoon fans who are like, look at how different this is, but I get it. There are people online who said, well, it looks kind of like Splatoon 2. I mean, it's the multiplayer side of things. I think where we're going to see the biggest change that would possibly be the single player where they'd have a bit more freedom as to what they can do, whereas the multiplayer side is very competitive, so why change something when it's not broken? What you would do is work to build off what Splatoon 2 has already accomplished, and it looks like what they're showing with Splatoon 3 is doing just that. We also look at the box art, and yeah, the box art looks good as well there, and there was one other interesting note that I didn't really think too much about, but after we had some data mining occur, as usual, apparently Splatoon 3 will be one version, so we wouldn't have any issues when it comes to regional differences between these different titles, which for a lot of people, they looked at like the different regional Splatfests and it was kind of annoying for them. In this case, it would just be global Splatfests, I guess. But everything they've shown so far with Splatoon 3, especially on the multiplayer side, looks very good. I'll be picking it up September 9th as soon as it drops. And I'm not the biggest Splatoon fan, but it was a lot of fun with Splatoon 2 when I was playing it online with some friends there. I'm still curious about the single player, and I think that will have its reveal at some point. Now, coming out in September, they could be setting up for maybe a reveal around their typical June Direct, just as an update for Splatoon 3. Just kind of throw that in there. So, hey, Nintendo's setting up a pretty good second half of 2022 currently, and I think they still have a bit more to show. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, Ubisoft is reportedly prepping to be sold. Do you think someone buys them? And if so, who? Look at that. 48% said Microsoft's getting their checkbook back out, and they're just gonna go ahead and buy Ubisoft. Sony coming in at 19%. 18% just says no one, Ubisoft won't be sold. Private equity firm at 11%. Then, hey, I had to throw someone else in there. I dropped Apple. I guess you could put Amazon or Tencent in its place there, but Microsoft just been spending big money, and people do look at Microsoft with basically limitless funds in order to pick up a larger entity like Ubisoft. I just question if they're like jumping at the chance right now when they're still working out everything with Activision Blizzard. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Mr. Mysterious saying, so if Skate 4 comes out this year, does that beat out TMNT for most anticipated game this year? I mean, yeah, it would, but I'm a bit concerned that if the new Skate game came out this year, it wouldn't necessarily be ready or feel content complete. That would kind of feel like EA is just sort of pushing this out the door with the idea of it's live service. We're just going to build on it over time. I'd like to see it released with a full career mode that has you sort of working your way up from the bottom and going from like a no-name up to winning championships and all this. Maybe have some stuff around building up your character through stat points and obviously unlocking boards and clothing and everything there. And then kind of just leaving everything level for the multiplayer side. They could take some pretty cool chances with career, and I hope they are offered, or at least afforded, the opportunity and time to do that in development. But if it comes out this year, I'm gonna be very excited. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's the JoyCon drift situation? Are you surprised to hear that there were thousands of JoyCon controllers that needed repair going through that facility at any one time? And then what about Halo Infinite and this latest roadmap? 343 hasn't had the best time developing it so far, but do you think they can turn it around and let's say 4 or 5 years from now when it's time to develop a new Halo game, would you have 343 do it? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.